Hey, welcome back to the Backyard Professor Responds videos. Area 52 kicks out some really good materials. And in this subject, ufology, we have a boatload of speculation. We have an enormous amount of different contexts that we're all trying to explore and integrate. A lot of it's guesswork. We have a lot of disinformation from PSYOP operations. Those are real. Those exist. There's no question about it. We have real information on the UFOs, the aliens. We have hundreds of different interpretations, and these utilize various different parts of evidences, either for good or bad. None of us really have the full picture for a very interesting reason. Yeah, I know. The government, those idiots, yeah, they hide stuff too. And yes, they kick out lies. They will tell 2 or 3 truths and intermingle a lie or two in with those truths, or just completely withhold the information. But Area 52 popped up a video a couple of days ago that I want to give a commentary on, a BYP Responds commentary, wherein he says the aliens have been the deceivers as well. And this took the government by surprise, and now they are trying hard to get one up on the aliens, as it were. What do you believe? What do you believe? I don't know. In sifting through everything, in trying to find out what's real, what's not. You know that saying, truth is stranger than fiction. In this issue, truth is stranger than fiction. It's not just a cute little saying. And there are going to be some fascinating ideas that he shared. Maybe not a lot of them are new. They're going to be new to some of us. Some of the ideas here are going to be new to some of us. Some of this is going to be very deeply disturbing. Some of it's going to piss you off. Some of it's going to leave you in awe. It's kind of got a whole bag of emotions. And that's why I want to comment on this, because I'll leave the comment or the link in my description. But I also want to add my voice to his commentary on this particular source he's using that I found positively shocking. And I know, I get it. Yeah, there's so many of you who are going to tell me, yeah, you're way behind, dude. You got to catch. I am catching up. I'm catching up with you faster than you think. And in the process, I am also adjusting psychologically to this information that is heinous concerning the aliens. I am adjusting psychologically to this information that is heinous from our government. And this takes time. This video demonstrated to me. Now, the way I approach this, here's how I'm going to approach this tonight, because our psychology, no matter when or how, full disclosure from the president of the United States or a leader of a major nation comes out, we still are not going to have full disclosure. That may never happen. I get that. I hope it will, but it's unlikely. That being said, let's move forward a little bit. Our psychology is not ready for the disclosure. And please don't get mad at me. I know there's so many people who say, yeah, I want to meet these guys. You might not after watching this video. Seriously. I'll tell you what. Here was my response, and then we'll get on with the commentary, the BYP commentary, the response. After watching this video, I pray to the Lord God Almighty that Chris Bledsoe's take on the aliens is the true one. Because this one is terrifying. It's not comfortable. It was not comfortable for me to watch. I'm just going to give you that heads up right up front. And in the process of feeling, I felt so many emotions, just white hot anger. I want to just beat somebody after some of the stuff that I heard. Some of it was astonishment. There's a whole range of emotions. Many of you are probably familiar with all of this information, and yet it is still disturbing. I was familiar with 90% of it, even though I'm brand new to this, so to speak. And I say brand new with, quotes. I mean, I've known about UFOs my whole life. I had an older brother who constantly told me about them. I have read several books through the years, not a whole lot, and I didn't make it a hobby like I'm going to do now. By the way, my equipment, some of my equipment is already on the way. Yeah, baby. I'm going to be doing some primary research on the UFOs myself with my eyes on the sky. That's coming up, and I will be glad to let you know. So, but back to reality for just a few minutes. Let's get on to this interview. I will stop it periodically to give a commentary, because it's not about his commentary that you're watching this video tonight. It's about what I'm going to say, because I also have a point of view that is somewhat similar to this gentleman, but not really. I have a differing point of view, and I'm going to share a comparison contrast. That doesn't mean one of us is right and one of us is wrong. That's not the issue. I'm not here to refute him. I'm not here to support him. I'm here to share my psychological ineptitude, my shock, my anger, my amazement, and what's the way forward? Well, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm starting to get miffed. My personal way forward I'm choosing is to become a ufologist researcher like the Tedesco brothers, like my guest last night, Steve Barone. The Backyard Professor is also going to begin showing you UFOs as I find them in the sky by looking. And yet there's so much more to it than that. So let's get on with this. That's enough of an introduction. This rabbit hole goes way down. This is positively weird. It gives me bad vibes. I'm an optimist. This stuff gives me bad vibes. Let's see what's going on. Let's take a look.
On December 12th, 2024, around 6:05 p.m. Eastern, I walk right past my balcony window. I live right across the river from the Newark FBI office, and I saw a massive 50-foot, approximately Vanta Black boomerang go right past my window. Silent, floated right across the river, right through the buildings downtown Newark. 3 white lights, 2 red, in a line on the back, made no noise.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Debriefed. My name is Chris Ramsey, and today we're going to take a good hard look at a document submitted to the Paranet website in 1987 by none other than the godfather of conspiracy, John Lear. Okay, before I read these out, I will give you a brief history on Mr. Lear himself. So John Lear is a former aviation captain, a commercial pilot, but also happens to be the son of Learjet inventor Bill Lear. John Lear, until he passed away a few years ago, was one of the most prominent figures in the UFO landscape. He not only had multiple FAA certifications, but also flew on several missions for the CIA, which inevitably made him a little bit more credible when he came out with the information that someone he knew worked for a secret facility within the United States government at Area 51 called Section 4, otherwise known as S4. Yes, folks, he introduced the world to Bob Lazar. He met with George Knapp and set up the most famous interview in ufology, I believe, to date.
Well, there's several, actually 9 flying saucers, flying discs that are out there of extraterrestrial origin.
However, over time, Lear's assertions became increasingly outlandish. He would go on rants about lunar bases, the moon being a hologram, and mind control projects. And while some admired him as a whistleblower, others felt his credibility waned as he got into more and more extreme conspiracies. And say what you want about the guy, but this guy was talking about mind control things before MKUltra went public. He was also talking about underground military bases where they were reverse engineering alien craft before we even heard of Area 51. Now, there is an entire other side to this, is that he potentially could be a psyop, meaning that the government used him in an active disinformation campaign, which would not be unheard of. And in fact, John Lear admits to this. He says that there is a potential that they fed him false information, and that would muddy up the actual correct information that he was able to leak out. And that's the way a lot of these disinformation campaigns function, is that they will put out a vast majority of truth and insert only 1 or 2 fibs. But these fibs sounding so extreme and bizarre in nature that it makes you literally throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, well, I guess they're lying about everything.
So the item that I wanted to catch your attention to was this idea of a psyop is very real, because it does happen. And it is happening in this particular field. There's no question about that. But the really amazing thing is, as we'll see a little later, the aliens are also doing a psyop on the government. And they didn't realize it at first. They sold us out as a humanity, as we're about to see. Understanding, though, I'm going to take this information as reality for the sake of the argument. Not that I actually personally believe everything we're about to hear tonight, but it's not all fake because of the way the information has come out in the last, say, 40, 50, 60 years. And this is what makes this subject so utterly darn fantastically fascinating. Let's keep going.
Now, what those lies are, I guess, is up to the public to decide. And that's something we're going to try to get to the bottom of today, as we're going to read through a statement that he put out so many years ago in 1987, detailing the government's involvement with EBEs, or extraterrestrial biological entities, UFOs, the reverse engineering, and the government's role in future disclosure. This all begins with a nice cover letter. This is from John W. White. If I'm not mistaken, John White is also a UFO researcher, and he is just forwarding this document that was put up on their version of Reddit, essentially. And he's saying the following, dear somebody, I don't know who that is, but it says, I'm sending this astounding document about UFOs to you because I feel you will be interested and or have a need to know. I obtained it by downloading it from an electronic bulletin board called Paranet, which is headquartered in Arizona and has regional nodes. Paranet is dedicated to disseminating information about paranormal phenomena and acting as a forum for discussion. Memberships in Paranet is free and open to the public. All it takes is a computer and a modem. You can dial in at 603-837-0062. Then find the original node nearest you So your phone charges will be minimized. Sincerely, John White. And whoever this was directed to wrote underneath a few questions that my guess is he faxed back to this person back then, and underlining Paranet and saying, who set this up? Who sustains it financially and why? Who benefits from those who really know things identifying themselves and their views via this bulletin board? I smell federal deceit. So even the person that this was sent to back in 1987 thought that this also was a psyop.
How many people have told me in the comments to, I've published quite a few videos so far, and I'm not going to stop doing that. How many people in the comments have said, oh yeah, that's a psyop. That's a psyop. That's a psyop. Now, I will confess, when I first started this wonderful adventure with ufology, that bothered me quite a bit because I want the truth, right? And so it appeared to me like people were just saying, yeah, that's a psyop to throw me off, or to make it so that I quit being so naive as to believe that these UFOs are really real, and that, yeah, the government has a live alien, and, you know, they interviewed them and all. Come on, man. This is all psyop. I mean, how many times have we seen this with the drones over New Jersey this last couple of months, right? Well, this convinced me that there is a lot of government psyop going on. But that doesn't affect the reality of the aliens. And this is one of the ironic conclusions that I came to this. I know there are some people who still say, no, this is all government in order to acquire maximal power over the world and enslave all of humanity. The entire alien thing is a lie. I don't take it that far. I think the UFOs are real. I think the aliens are real. But I also know government psyops are real also. The crazy thing is, we now have an idea that there is an alien psyop also. Very interesting. We'll see that here in a little while. I love how he sets the stage here.
We stand on the very shaky shoulders of a lot of conspiracy theorists before us. Let's get into his document. It starts by saying, John Lear has requested that the following file be published on Paranet. It is our philosophy to encourage debate on paranormal issues, no matter how controversial, and we welcome his input. The information contained in this file has not been verified by Paranet, nor do the opinions expressed herein necessarily reflect those of the administrator or other Paranet staff members. We can state, however, that John is who he says he is and has numerous contacts in sensitive positions that could conceivably allow him to access information of this type. And that, folks, has been known for a very long time, is that John was working in the CIA and did say on numerous occasions that he was being fed information by people who were on the inside, or otherwise known as people in the program. So here is the statement. We begin. This is December 29th, 1987, folks. Almost 40 years to the day. That is insane. John Lear, a captain for a major U.S. airline, has flown over 160 different types of aircraft in over 50 different countries. He holds 17 world speed record in Learjet and is the only pilot ever to hold every airline certificate issued by the Federal Aviation Administration. Lear has flown missions worldwide for the CIA and other government agencies. A former Nevada state senator candidate, he is the son of William P. Lear, designer of the Learjet executive airplane, the 8-track stereo, and founder of Lear Siegler Corporation. Lear became interested in the subject of UFOs 13 months ago after talking with United States Air Force personnel who had witnessed a UFO landing at Bentwaters Air Force Base near London, England, and 3 small aliens walking up to the wing commander. So the Lakenheath Bentwaters incident, now when saying, is it Lakenheath, I'm not sure, but that does sound familiar. Isn't that the current Air Force base that is being incurred by a lot of these unexplainable drone activities?
So there have been witnesses who have seen UFOs come in and land at air bases, and the aliens come out and talk to the humans. So far as we're aware, that didn't happen at all over the course of the last 20 years. If it is, it's covered up, right? I mean, that is a very valid way of thinking through this. But you don't hear of the UFOs coming in and landing at the air bases. They're just flying around them now, and they're flying around the nuclear installations as well. So back then, it was easier to describe what was actually happening. Now, with the cover up, with the government psyop and all that noise and hullabaloo, we don't hear the full picture at all. Not that we heard the full picture back then, but it was a more complete picture, and it did involve meetings between aliens and humans. That is intriguing.
So the Lakenheath Bentwaters incident was a series of radar and visual contacts with UFOs over air bases in eastern England on the night of August 13th and 14th in 1956. So it involved a personnel from the Royal Air Force and the United States Air Force. I mean, some of these targets were detected approaching Bentwaters from the east at a speed estimated from 2,000 to 4,000 miles an hour. It passed overhead. A rapidly moving white light was observed from the ground, while the pilot of a C-47 at 4,000 feet over Bentwaters reported a similar light had passed beneath his craft. At this point, Bentwaters alerted the U.S. tenanted RAF Lakenheath base 40 miles to the northwest to look out for targets. And then ground personnel at Lakenheath made visual sightings of several luminous objects, including two which arrived, made a sharp change in course, and appeared to merge before moving off. And so what Mr. Lear is getting to here, that it didn't stop with radar and visual sightings of a UFO, but that it continued with 3 small aliens walking up to the wing commander. All right, we carry on here. Note to the press: the government of the United States continues to rely on your personal and professional gullibility to suppress the information contained herein. Your cooperation over the past 40 years has exceeded our wildest expectations, and we salute you. The sun does not revolve around the earth. The United States government has been in business with little gray extraterrestrials for about 20 years. The first truth stated here got Giordano Bruno burned at the stake in 1600 AD for daring to propose that this was real. The second truth has gotten far more people killed trying to state it publicly than will ever be known. That is a dark fact right there.
Yes, it is. Yeah. So the interaction between humans and aliens began even before Roswell. Very interesting how this comes out through this discussion by John Lear. But there has been steady interaction from a long time ago. And this is what's been being hidden from us, and we're about to find out how and why that has been hidden, because back then, maybe we couldn't have handled it. But now, we can handle it, but we're not going to like it. We are slowly being attuned to the fact that the government sold us out, and the reason why. Sold us out to the aliens. We'll see.
Wow. But the truth must be told. The fact that the earth revolves around the sun was successfully suppressed by the church for over 200 years. It eventually caused a major upheaval in the church, government, and thought. a realignment of social and traditional values. That was in the 1800s. Now, about 400 years after the first truth was pronounced, we must again face the shocking facts, the horrible truth the government has been hiding from us for over 40 years. Unfortunately, the horrible truth is far more horrible than the government had ever imagined. In its effort to protect democracy, our government sold us to the aliens. And here's how it happened. But before I begin, I'd like to offer a word in the defense of those who bargained us away. They had the best of intentions. Well, you know that saying, the road to hell was paved with good intentions. Germany may have recovered a flying saucer as early as 1939. General James H. Doolittle went to Sweden in 1946 to inspect a flying saucer that had crashed there in Spitsbergen. In 1947, President Truman established a group of 12 of the top military scientific personnel of their time. They were known as MJ-12, or Majestic 12.
The people that control this information is a organization that we know of as MJ-12.
Although the group exists today, none of the original members are still alive. The last one to die was Gordon Gray, former Secretary of the Army, in 1984. As each member passed away, the group itself appointed a new member to fill the position. There is some speculation that the group known as MJ-12 expanded to at least several more members. There were several more saucer crashes in the late 1940s, one in Roswell, New Mexico, one in Aztec, New Mexico, and one near Laredo, Texas, about 30 miles inside the Mexican border. Consider, if you will, the position of the United States government at the time. There are several crashes reported here, one of which is mentioned is Aztec, New Mexico, and this is one I'm currently looking into as I'm reading a book on it, and there seems to be a substantial and overwhelming amount of evidence, of documentation of this retrieval to have happened, and that this craft was eventually, potentially, brought into Los Alamos. You know, by looking at the 4chan whistleblower, if you haven't checked that video out yet, I highly recommend, but we did a deep dive on this person who said he basically worked for a secret branch of the government that did these crash retrievals. But he would say that, yeah, near Mexico and New Mexico, that's where they would go down. They avoid that spot like the plague currently, but back then they would find quite a bit of them go down in that vicinity.
Now that's interesting because I just saw the question asked the other night in another video that I was researching in the comment section. Why doesn't anyone report saucers anymore? All we're seeing is orbs. It appears like the orbs are vastly more popular, more numerous now than actual saucers. And it's true. There's people who say, yes, we saw a saucer, or there's numerous different shapes of the UFOs that they're talking about. But the preponderance of evidence appears to give us these plasmoids, they call them, plasma orbs. And so this is kind of an interesting shift. Did the aliens become paranoid about flying in flying saucers because of their experience in the desert southwest of the United States? Because apparently there were several crashes down there. Something interesting to think about.
It really, really makes you ponder that during that time, obviously there was the Manhattan Project that came from this, and, you know, Oppenheimer and all of that, where the Germans were racing against the Russians and the Americans to try and build a nuke. And during that time, you know, there was a ton of nuclear work being done, and thus UFO incursions were happening at all these bases. And namely, if you want to check it out, there's an amazingly brilliant video by YouTuber Jesse Michaels, American Alchemy, who put that out. Go check that out. What a fun rabbit hole to jump down. He did a brilliant job on that. So think about this. The government, we know that during the Cold War, when they even heard about psychics or Russia's sort of psychic activity into mind reading and mind control and all of that, they started their own branches of the very same work, because they said, hey, if this stuff is real, we can't take a chance and not look into it. We have to at least pour some resources into it and look at it, you know, ourselves. The same has to be said about the UFO thing. I mean, Foo Fighters in the war were avoiding these things because they were almost colliding with them during their missions. There had to be an extreme amount of research into this topic by both the Axis and the Allies back then.
So part of that psychic research. Now, when I first heard about this, that was when I was reading James Randi and Isaac Asimov and Carl Sagan and Arthur C. Clarke and many other of the famous, what I call classical scientific writers. The theme of remote viewing was so poo-pooed. It was absolutely eviscerated by classical science and science writers. They said, don't be stupid and ridiculous. There's absolutely no evidence whatsoever for that. And so I had a negative taste for these so-called paranormal activities. And, you know, who among us did not utterly mock Ronald Reagan when the news came out that he was consulting astrologers when he was president of the United States of America? The science community went ballistic over that. We couldn't believe it. What an idiot. Consulting astrologers, and, you know, the idea of our Army wasting our tax dollars on remote viewing. That was a huge deal back then. Yeah? Yet now we see the rationale, and we now know that remote viewing really does happen. And it really is used by the military and the intelligence communities to this day. It is part and parcel of the investigation. I mean, my, how times have changed. So this impacted our social life, our politics, and our psychology, and our reality, and our science, because science had cut the line and thrown out all the woo. Science itself identified what the woo was. Anything not material is not valid. I mean, who hasn't read, what's his nose? Victor Stanger, one of my favorite science writers. Oh, he hated, I should say. I loved reading his stuff. He was so fun to read back in the day. He hated consciousness studies. He couldn't stand the way these, and he would mock them, and he labeled anybody who studied consciousness or spirituality or quantum physics, when they began to mix them all together, you know, oh, he had a field day. He eviscerated them. He mocked them. He spit on them. He hated them. And now we know all of this, quote, woo, is being integrated into this UFO subject. And it has been actually involved in the military and the politics for a very long time. So this is a real paradigm shift that we're going through. Truly.
Be a fool to think they weren't at least trying to uncover what was going on and militarizing it somehow. I digress. Consider, if you will, the position of the United States government at that time. They proudly thought of themselves as the most powerful nation on Earth, having recently produced the atomic bomb, an achievement so stupendous it would take Russia 4 years to catch up, and only with the help of traitors to democracy. They had built a jet aircraft that had exceeded the speed of sound in flight. They had built jet bombers with intercontinental range that could carry weapons of enormous destruction. The post-war era and the future seemed bright. Now imagine what it was like for those same leaders, all of whom had witnessed the panic of Orson Welles' radio broadcast, The War of the Worlds in 1938.
We are bringing you an eyewitness account of what's happening on the Wilmuth Farm, Grover's Mill, New Jersey.
Lord, they're turning into flames. Now the whole field's caught up by the woods, the barns, the gas tanks for the automobiles.
Ladies and gentlemen, due to circumstances beyond our control, we are unable to continue the broadcast from Grover's Mill.
Thousands of Americans panicked at a realistically presented invasion of Earth by beings from another planet. Imagine their horror as they actually viewed the dead bodies of these frightening-looking little creatures with enormous eyes, reptilian skin, and claw-like fingers. Imagine their shock as they attempted to determine how these strange saucers were powered and could discover no part even remotely similar to components they were familiar with. No cylinders or pistons, no vacuum tubes or turbines or hydraulic actuators. It is only when you fully understand the overwhelming helplessness the government was faced with in the late 1940s that you can comprehend their perceived need for a total, thorough, and sweeping cover-up, to include the use of deadly force. When something this paradigm-shifting on the military battlefield is encountered, you have to acknowledge that putting this in the wrong hands can lead to devastating and obviously world-changing consequences. So their use of deadly force to protect this secret, according to them, was justified.
So, again, militaristically, during World War II, and see, this was the second time. The First World War was trench warfare, a complete horror. It was just horrible. World War II, with Hitler's blitzkrieg attitude of go fast, blitzkrieg, lightning fast attacks, was a complete change of pace. And it was terrifying. And in the midst of this, okay, I have harped about the military mindset of our government. But here it just appears to me like there was no choice. And there was no way that if remote viewing actually did work, if they had mediums, if the Germans and the Russians had mediums that could give them insider information on where your troops were, or perhaps forecast the future through the stars of astrological calculations, and they knew that you were going to split your force, 1/3 was going to go south, 1/3 was going to go north, and 1/3 was going to stay behind. If they could calculate that out and figure that out, they could beat you strategically. You can't afford to let that happen. So it's best that if you heard your enemies is doing something of the most utterly ridiculous, non-scientific, new age woo-woo way, then you, by golly, had better get with it also and make sure it doesn't work. If it does work, use it. This context helps me better see why the remote viewing was so important to the intelligence community in the United States military and government. This kind of opened me up a little bit and said, well, yeah, that's the context, all right. Why let any of your enemies have any type of advantage or a secret weapon or something that is going to clobber you? Why let them do that? You know, we have to arm ourselves also. And so this made sense to me. I still wish we were better at all of us making friends instead of enemies, but I understand. At this juncture, this approach.
Cover-up was so successful that as late as 1985, a senior scientist with the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, Dr. Al Hibbs, would look at a videotape of an enormous flying saucer and state the record, "I'm not going to assign anything to that UFO phenomena. without a lot more data. Dr. Hibbs was looking at the naked emperor and saying he certainly looks naked, but that doesn't prove he's naked. Sounds a lot like Arrow. In July of 1952, a panicked government watched helplessly as a squadron of flying saucers flew over Washington, D.C. and buzzed the White House, the Capitol building, and the Pentagon. It took all the imagination and intimidation the government could muster to force that incident out of the memory of the public.
I am here to discuss the so-called flying saucers. We can say that the recent sightings are in no way connected with any secret development by any department of the United States.
A pretty incredible incident. Had that happened today, it kind of is happening today, if you think about it. Thousands of sightings occurred during the Korean War, and several more saucers were retrieved by the Air Force. Some were stored at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Some were stored at Air Force bases near the location of the crash site. What I'm going to read to you next is interesting because this was actually echoed by Ross Coulthard recently. As recent as last year, Ross had said that there was a giant UFO somewhere that was too big to move, so they built the base around it. And that really made headlines in the UFO community.
People are going to question what I'm about to say. What if some of that shit is so big it can't be moved? So big they built a building over it in a country outside of the United States of America.
But in fact, John Lear, he's got it right here. One saucer was so enormous and the logistic problems in transportation so enormous that it was buried at the crash site and remains there today. The stories are legendary on transporting crashed saucers over long distances, moving only at night, purchasing complete farms, slashing through forests, blocking major highways, sometimes driving 2 and 3 lowboys in tandem with an extraterrestrial load 100 feet in diameter.
This is astonishing because John Lear wrote that in 1987. So that information was out on a public place in 1987. So Ross Coulthard, I see every now and then people really criticize him and say, oh yeah, he's basically a marshmallow. He'll just say whatever he thinks will excite the audience or keep his money wheel greased, etc. Now Coulthard, I've heard it in another video of his, he said his source told him that, who is from that country, and he won't reveal his source like the good journalist he is. But this is the second, and I'm sure there's more, but this is the second corroboration. And we have this second one in 2023. Well, a UFO that big that we can't move it with our abilities to move stuff today, that has to be extremely big. The only way to hide it is build a building around it. That makes perfect sense. But what are we dealing with here? That's some really serious technology to build that big of a flying ship, far bigger than a 767 or 787 or 797 if they ever get to that point. So big they can't even move it. That's kind of amazing. Sometimes, and realizing in this exact letter, in this paper, we really don't know where to draw the line between reality and fantasy. What part of it's true? What kind of story parts are he embellishing? Is he expanding too much? Is he adding extra details? What is he leaving out, etc.? We don't have any real discrimination way of testing this because we're still under the denial phase in ufology from the government and the military, etc. It's like pulling eye teeth to get them to admit anything. So, and this is why it's so important for witnesses and whistleblowers to come forward. Yeah, to our Congress today. But it's a fascinating thing that Coulthard has now kind of kept that idea up on the surface.
On April 30th, 1964, the first communication between these aliens and the U.S. government took place at Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico. 3 saucers had landed at a prearranged area, and a meeting was held between the aliens and intelligence officers of the U.S. government. All right, folks, the Holloman Air Force incident is pretty infamous in UFO lore. And one of the reasons why is because there was a documentary actually put out by the CIA back in the day. And at the very end of this documentary is about an 8-second clip. This 8-second clip is what seems to be has a flying saucer coming down on sort of desert terrain and about to land, and the video feed cuts. Turns out I believe, director of that very documentary says that video exists uncut. And that as the video goes on, this craft comes to the ground, lands, and exiting from it are multiple alien beings. And that's where a meeting happened. But hidden in plain sight, they decided to keep in footage in this documentary. And here's a clip.
And in 1973, they go to Bob Emenegger and Alan Sandler, 2 producers in Los Angeles, and they asked them to do a UFO documentary. And Bob Emenegger is a total UFO skeptic, said, "What do you mean this is for real?" And at that point, the security manager, Paul Shardle at Norton Air Force Base, said, what would you say if I told you an alien ship landed at Holloman Air Force Base, 6 o'clock in the morning in May of 1971, and we filmed it from 3 different vantage points, 2 on the ground, 1 in a helicopter, and we will allow you to use the film for your documentary. So he puts his documentary, and then what happens at the end of the documentary is they say, we can't use the film. We can't allow, it's the Watergate, it's bad timing, we can't allow you to use the film, and they pull the film. And then I find out that there's 8 seconds of the Holloman Air Force Base film in the film. So Bob's my friend, I phone him up, Bob, there's 8 seconds of film in there. And he goes, well, yeah. And I said, you told me they pulled the film. Oh, no, he said, it's background. And I said, background? What do you mean it's background? And he said, it didn't show anything. And what it is you see the hills of Holloman, and you see this object, this brilliantly lit object at 6 o'clock in the morning coming over the hills, but it's in a distance. So you don't see it close up, and you don't see the alien when the alien gets out. That's the classified part. So they want you to know that Holloman happened, and they allowed them to use the 8 seconds of the film, but the rest of the film, the classified part, was pulled.
Make of that what you will, but that is one compelling story.
Okay, so number one, I want you to observe that what they showed looked very, very much like an orb from that distance, didn't it? So that's an important clue. Items in sun from a distance have this orb look, even though it was a saucer. So be that as it may, it's remarkable that there is a video that is being hidden that shows that UFO landing and 3 of the aliens come out of that UFO. Will we ever see the evidence? This is a story without evidence. That's been the complaint. Legitimate. But we have other ways of testing this. Let's keep watching.
So during the period of 1969 to 1971, MJ-12, representing the U.S. government, made a deal with these creatures called EBEs, or extraterrestrial biological entities, named by Detlev Bronk. He was an original MJ-12 member and 6th president of Johns Hopkins University. The deal was that in exchange for technology they would provide to us, we agreed to ignore the abductions that were going on and suppress information on the cattle mutilations. And to further illustrate this point, here's a 1988 episode of Gumby.
Hey, what's going on here? We need samples of genes and chromosomes from your kind to develop a stronger breed of people. Because on our planet, radiation damages our DNA so that we are dying off to extinction. We'll help you, but you know, we need help too. What do you need? The people on Earth are suffering from many kinds of pollution. We need your advanced technology to help us develop a clean source of energy.
The EBEs assured MJ-12 that the abductions, usually lasting about 2 hours, were merely the ongoing monitoring of developing civilizations.
By what right do these guys get to decide to let the aliens operate with immunity and impunity and use us humans as their crossbreeding ground? We've been sold out, if this story is true. Now, the crazy thing is, this story has mind-boggling evidence. I was so angry earlier today. We've got evidence.
John lists out the purposes for the abductions and what they turned out to be. Number one, the insertion of a 3mm spherical device through the nasal cavity of the abductee into the brain. The device is used for the biological monitoring, tracking, and control of the abductee. This is something touched on in several books by thousands of abductees, actually, which is interesting. You know, looking at the work of John Mack, David Jacobs, Bud Hopkins, this would come up quite frequently, that this rod, which had a very tiny ball on the end of it, was inserted into the nasal cavity way far up. And then when extracted, that ball was gone. What's also interesting to me is that it says to control the abductee, which makes me think that these gray beings, maybe perhaps not the other beings, but the gray ones specifically, couldn't mind control you maybe without it. Number two, implementation of post-hypnotic suggestion to carry out a specific activity during a specific time period, the actuation of which will occur within the next 2 to 5 years. Well, there's that. I mean, this was 1987. That would make it 1992 at the latest. Maybe they did, I don't know, carry out some specific activity that is unbeknownst to us that has perhaps little or no consequence to our daily lives. I don't know. But that seems speculatory at best. Number three, termination of some people so that they could function as living sources for biological material and substances. Okay. Number four,
I can't even say what I'm thinking.
termination of individuals who represent a threat to the continuation of their activity.
In the last couple of years, have you had incidences that have caused you to be in fear for your life for addressing these issues?
Yes, personally.
Yeah. I just want everyone to note that he's coming forward in fear of his life. To put in perspective, if they were really not scared about this information coming out, why would someone be intimidated like that?
Number five, affect genetic engineering experiments. Number six, impregnation of human females and early termination of pregnancies to secure the crossbreed infant.
So use us, abuse us, rape us, so that you can get your technology. Is it any wonder that no one trusts the government? Is it any wonder why they're being so secretive? And then they abduct and kidnap, and they steal babies. I mean, how many vile crimes that would net the frickin' death penalty did our government subject humanity to so that they could acquire more power? Now, I'm trying very damn hard not to throw a tizzy fit here. I'll just leave it at that. I'll let you sit and brew on that. Next time you go to elect somebody, you make damn good and sure they're a good person, not one who tells you what they think you want to hear. Find out what kind of characters we're putting into power, because we suck at putting people into power. They turn against us.
Seems like the craziest, but honestly, this is the most widely reported among abductees, is the genetic engineering that has taken place on board, and most of the time has to do with what seems to be some type of hybridization program. Again, this isn't stuff that I'm making up. It's stuff that I've read, and that's quite expansive in terms of the literature that's out there and the documentation of this. Like, this has been documented extensively, mainly through post-hypnotic regression, because for some reason, apparently the people who've been abducted, they just, their memories are wiped, but for some reason, I guess these EBEs don't have access to the subconscious. The impregnation thing, I mean, that comes up quite a bit. Does this mean all extraterrestrials are doing this? No. Does this mean any of them are doing this? No, but it does suggest it. With extraordinary claims, I mean, you require extraordinary evidence. And the only evidence that exists that's out there today currently is, for the most part, at best, anecdotal. And let's be clear, that doesn't imply that I'm invalidating this anecdotal evidence, but it is someone's word against another. What is interesting is that there are thousands of these someone who are saying essentially the same things. And I think when that happens and you gain enough human intelligence testimony, I think you have to start looking at it more seriously. And I think that's what some of the work of a lot of these researchers did, including, potentially here, John Lear. Believe it, don't believe it. We're going to keep reading. I think this is really interesting. I'm not saying that this is what's going on, by the way, folks. All right. So don't work yourselves up for this. I would love to hear your opinion on this, whether you think it's true or not, but I would encourage you to at least do some research on it, because you'll find that in the research that I've done with multiple people who have, great educational backgrounds and varying degrees of credibility, have talked about this very thing for a very long time. It's kind of like the dark side, like ufology and the UFO stuff. There's the UAP, the drone, all this, but then there's like a deeper, more nefarious section to ufology that he's touching on. And it can be disturbing for some to look down that road, and others choose just to ignore it completely. And that's totally fine. So
it's not totally fine to those who've been abducted, but I get what he's saying. He's trying to remain neutral, and he's saying this is one part of the rabbit hole from one person's point of view. Now, the issue comes up, is John Lear on the government side feeding us enough information and yet being a psyop, adding lies into this? And how do we distinguish between what is true and what is false? Man, that's the issue. That is the issue. We just can't at this point. And we may never be able to, ever. But this doesn't mean that we can't. This is why it's so important to study all sides of this thing, compare, cross-reference, double-check, cross-check, etc. This is horrifying on so many levels to me.
The U.S. government was not initially aware of their far-reaching consequences of their deal. They were led to believe that the abductions were essentially benign. And since they figured the abductions would probably go on anyway, whether they agreed to or not, they merely insisted that a current list of abductees be submitted on a periodic basis to MJ-12 and the National Security Council. Does this sound incredible? An actual list of abductees sent to the National Security Council? Read on, because I have news for you. All right, here we go into what I assume is some speculation. I mean, this whole document might just be speculatory, but regardless. The EBEs have a genetic disorder in that their digestive system is atrophied and non-functional. Some speculate that they were involved in some type of accident or nuclear war, or possibly on the backside of an evolutionary genetic curve, meaning they're like devolving. In order to sustain themselves, they used an enzyme or hormonal secretion obtained from the tissue that they extract from humans and animals. Note that cows and humans are genetically similar. In the event of a national disaster, cow's blood can be used by humans. We've talked about this before with the EBO document. The secretions obtained are then mixed with hydrogen peroxide, applied on the skin by spreading or dipping parts of their bodies in the solution. The body absorbs the solution, then secretes the waste back out through the skin. This sounds familiar. Obviously, this document came out way before the EBO document came out, suggesting that the pores on their skin were made to sort of secrete whatever it was. But what he says here is the secretions are mixed with hydrogen peroxide to disinfect. Like, why would that be necessary? The EBO document said that they assumed that they drank liquids. What John Lear is alluding to here is that instead they dipped parts of their body or spread this solution. Now, how can you tell the difference between what you're consuming and what you're excreting, like your body, for instance? It doesn't make sense. That's like feeding ourselves through our own anuses. Like, it just doesn't seem, obviously it doesn't seem delectable, but it also doesn't seem very logical.
That is just bizarre, isn't it? Wow, I have never heard that before about the aliens. Wow. Like I say, this rabbit hole takes some really wild hairpin turns, man. Holy mackerel. And it just keeps going. We're dealing with an alien. I mean, man.
So the cattle mutilations that were prevalent throughout the period from 1973 to 1983 and publicly noted through newspaper and magazine stories, and included a documentary produced by Linda Howe for Denver CBS affiliate KMGH-TV, were for the collection of these tissues by the aliens. The mutilations included genitals taken, rectums cored out to the colon, eyes, tongue, and throat all surgically removed with extreme precision. In some cases, the incisions were made by cutting between the cells, a process that we are not yet capable of performing in the field. That's really interesting. Wow. How can you even verify that? In many of the mutilations, there was no blood found at all in the carcass. Yet there was no vascular collapse of the internal organs. This has been also noted in the human mutilations. One of the first of which was Sergeant Jonathan P. Louette at the White Sands Missile Test Range in 1956, who was found 3 days after an Air Force major had witnessed his abduction by a disc-shaped object at 0300 hours while on a search for missile debris downrange. And the following is a little explicit, folks. Forewarned. His genitals had been removed, rectum cored out in a surgically precise plug up to the colon, eyes removed, and all blood removed with, again, no vascular collapse. From some of the evidence, it is apparent that this surgery is accomplished in most cases while the victim, animal or human, is still alive.
Good God. And our government authorized this for technology. I remember those cattle mutilations. We had some happen within 30 miles of our city, and it terrified our entire country, all around us, everywhere. It ruined our Halloweens. Nobody went trick-or-treating for 2 years. One, because I think one of the mutilations happened in October, and then another one happened again that same month in October, a week before Halloween, and it destroyed Halloween for us. Nobody went trick-or-treating. anywhere. We were all just ablaze with what is going on. And I remember the local news, they did have the story. They just briefly showed the cow, and then they mostly talked to the farmers who lost their cows. But there was one farmer who lost several cows. I mean, it cost that poor guy some money, man. And of course, we never found out what it was. It was a horror story. It terrorized us. And that's the rest is history. It's fascinating to me that they also did that with humans. I have never heard that before, ever. We knew about the cattle mutilations. We never heard that there was a human. Now, granted, that was back in 1956, but they hid it. How many more humans were taken and mutilated for their various body parts and their blood, etc.? Who knows how many hundreds of thousands they could have taken in all secrecy from all over the world so that they could build up their own civilization without regard of life or rights, the animals, the humans, just so they could share some technology with the humans. That is a terrifying commentary on our government.
The various parts of the body are taken to various underground laboratories, one of which is known to be near the small New Mexico town of Dulce. This jointly occupied CIA-alien facility has been described as enormous, with huge tiled walls that go on forever, in quotes. Witnesses have reported huge vats filled with amber liquid, with parts of human bodies being stirred inside. Now, this, folks, sounds like a hellish nightmare. Let's just stop here for a second, because I do want to acknowledge something, that John Lear has never seen any of this stuff. This is absolute speculatory information at best, but he's given zero sources. Know that I don't assume that this is the truth. I do find it interesting that there are connections to cattle mutilation, that there are military sites here that are named, military personnel, as well as, many factors that would indicate that something is going on, but none of which proves anything. Before some of you, log off being scared of this and like this is frightening you, know that this might not be the situation. And when disinformation happens, which I've mentioned before, a lot of times the truth is told, and a few little lies are sprinkled throughout, of which are probably the most unbelievable things.
Or else the truth is the unbelievable things, and the lies are the little soft, wispy, not to worry about details. That's the problem with stuff like this. Yeah. Why would someone just simply make this up? It's not like John Lear was writing science fiction or a mystery thriller. He was reporting information on UFOs. We have no idea. We have no way to really test the validity of that. Or do we? Because the abductees' experiences were cross-checked, were analyzed, actual repetition and patterns was found. I myself interviewed, while I was in college, a UFO abductee in my town. And she had everything to lose. And she lost it because she insisted she was abducted. And her husband back then in the 1980s, when this was going on, the late 1980s, her husband was making 6 digits annually. And I don't mean low 6 digits. And he ended up divorcing her because it destroyed his reputation. She ended up losing her children, her prestige, her almost dang near her humanity. She lost all her friends, her family, complete nut job and kook. And yet, as I studied the John Mack and the various different Whitley Strieber and the various different accounts back then, I was struck by what would the reason be for people just saying this stupid stuff is happening, you know? The Walton case, etc. Betty and Barney Hill. I mean, why would they just make stupid stuff up like that? It makes no sense when there is so much to lose. And so this was a real thing for many years that had reverberations and still does, because I've just recently seen, at least in the titles, I have not watched the YouTube videos, but I have seen in the titles that new abduction cases are showing up. But it's what he says here in a few minutes that made me come unglued. I really, this is why I hope, sincerely, and it might be because I'm short-sighted. I'm well aware, I'm almost willing to say, yeah, if that's the tack you want to take, you're welcome to take it. But the immorality, the gross, incompetent immorality of the government selling us out, I really hope there is a God of justice to give those bastards the judgment they are due. Because what he says coming up here pretty quick just goes through me like hot lead. I hate disinformation if it's real.
And so, you know, with this stuff, I look for the things that stand out. And I say to myself, it's either an exaggeration, a misinterpretation, or disinformation, I think. Like a vat mixing it with human body parts, to me, that sounds completely ludicrous. I'll be honest. Is it real? You know, maybe, who knows? But to me, that sounds like you would add something into a story to try and incite fear, instill fear in someone. And so maybe that's him regurgitating information that he was given to make him fearful of, you know, whatever's going on. I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. We're guessing here. After the initial agreement, Groom Lake, one of this nation's most secret test centers, was closed for a period of about a year, sometime between 1972 and 1974, and a huge underground facility was constructed for and with the help of the EBEs. The bargain for technology was set in place, but could only be operated by the EBEs themselves. Needless to say, the advanced technology could not be used against the EBEs themselves, even if needed. Now that is very interesting. This part I find extremely interesting. Because if you were an advanced civilization, the last thing you would want to do is give your most advanced technology to the most primitive life forms that you've ever encountered. Instead, you're going to bargain some deal where they can play with your toys as long as you can supervise it. And in exchange, yeah, you'll get access to whatever you were going to get access to anyways. But it seems like you're playing fair. You know, this even kind of corresponds to some of the claims that Bob Lazar made, whereas when he went to S4, especially on one occasion when he was giving a tour, he had a look down sort of this hangar hallway and saw one of these, what he refers to as children, having a conversation with Air Force staff or the staff that was present. And, you know, this thing was very, very short and it seemed like a child. And so it would be interesting to find out that they are indeed working with them. But I suppose if you were working with them, it wouldn't be under our set of rules. It would be under theirs. During the period between 1979 and 1983, it became increasingly obvious to MJ12 that things were not going as planned. It became known that many more people, in the thousands, were being abducted than were listed on the official abduction lists. In addition, it became obvious that some, not all, but some of the nation's missing children had been used for secretions and other parts required by the aliens.
That's the part that just pisses me off. That's all I'm going to say on this. If I get starting to rant and rave, you won't like what I have to say. They probably wouldn't let me post this video without getting in trouble, but our government is not our friend. And we have to stop stupidly electing and keep electing the same people that we keep electing, who keep doing the same stupid shit. I gotta quit, or I'm gonna really unwind here. I hope there's a God who really is just. This makes me unashamed to say, yeah, please let there be a God so justice can be served. Oh, hell yeah.
In 1979, there was an altercation of sorts at the Dulce laboratory. A special armed forces unit was called in to try and free a number of our people trapped in the facility who had become aware of what was really going on. According to one source, 66 of the soldiers were killed, and our people were not freed. Okay.
So this is the part where even the aliens had lied to the government, just like the government lies to us. There just doesn't appear to be a universal honesty in any of the frickin' species that exist. That's disheartening. That's disheartening. What's the answer? Yeah, I know. You're going to say Jesus. I have possible, really bad news for you here in just a few minutes.
What source? You know, according to a source, anyone can say that. By 1984, MJ12 must have been in stark terror at the mistake they had made in dealing with the EBEs. They had subtly promoted Close Encounters of the Third Kind and E.T. to get the public used to odd-looking aliens that were compassionate, benevolent, and very much our space brothers. So again, he's stating here that, Close Encounters and E.T., both Spielberg movies, by the way, were psyops to prepare the public, the general public, to sort of become aware of these benevolent, weird, strange-looking creatures. It is interesting. It is interesting as well that in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, J. Allen Hynek has a cameo and I think was probably used as a consultant during that movie. And I mean, Spielberg's fascination with UFOs goes on to today. He's currently, I think, working on another UFO movie or alien or UFO related movie that is slated for, I think, 2026. MJ12 sold the EBEs to the public, and we're now faced with the fact that quite the opposite was true. In addition, a plan was formulated in 1968 to make the public aware of the existence of aliens on Earth over the next 20 years, to be culminated with several documentaries to be released during 1985 to 1987 period of time. These documentaries would explain the history and intentions of the EBEs. The discovery of the grand deception put the entire plans, hopes, and dreams of MJ12 into utter confusion and panic.
Even our very favorite movie-making heroes are a bunch of lying hypocrites. And we make multimillionaires because we think E.T. is cute. And we're going to do the same thing when he brings out his next movie, too. On all the documentaries. Everything is designed, if this information is valid, Everything is designed to give the 1% most powerful the goods. The rest of us aren't even cattle. You let that sink in.
Well, these documentaries are still coming out. You know, there was the recent one, which was, I believe, was it called Encounters, or it was on Netflix, and it was Spielberg once again. So very interesting. So meeting at the Country Club, a remote lodge with a private golf course, comfortable sleeping and working quarters, and its own private airship built by and exclusively for members of MJ-12. It was a factional fight of what to do now. Part of MJ-12 wanted to confess the whole scheme and shambles it had become to the public, beg their forgiveness, and ask for their support. The other part and majority of MJ-12 argued that there was no way they could do that the situation was untenable, and there was no use in exciting the public with the horrible truth, and that the best plan was to continue the development of a weapon so that it could be used against the EBEs under the guise of Strategic Defense Initiative, which had nothing whatsoever to do with the defense for inbound Russian nuclear missiles. As these words are being written, Dr. Edward Teller, father of the H-bomb, is personally in the test tunnels of the Nevada test site, driving his workers and associates, in the words of one, like a man possessed. And well, he should, for Dr. Teller is a member of MJ-12, along with Dr. Kissinger, Admiral Bobby Inman, and possibly Admiral Poindexter, to name a few of the current MJ-12 members.
What a bombshell. The whole Cold War scheme was a diversion to fool the aliens, the EBEs, the aliens, so that we could get a weapon strong enough to defeat them. Because the government made the deal with the devil, and they lost. Why are we so incompetent at all levels? Man.
Now, before the grand deception was discovered, and according to a meticulous plan of metered release of information to the public, several documentaries and UFO tapes were made. William Moore, a Burbank, California-based UFO researcher who wrote The Roswell Incident, a book published in 1980 that detailed the crash, recovery, and subsequent cover-up of a UFO with 4 alien bodies, has made a videotape of 2 newsmen interviewing a military officer associated with MJ-12. And the cover-up, the recovery of a number of flying saucers, and the existence of a live alien, one of 3 aliens captured and designated or named EBE-1, EBE-2, and EBE-3, being held in a facility designated as YY-2 at Los Alamos, New Mexico. The only other facility of this type which is electromagnetically secure is at Edwards Air Force Base in Mojave, California. The officer names, as previously mentioned, plus a few others, Harold Brown, Richard Helms, General Vernon Walters, JPL's Dr. Lou Allen, and Dr. Theodore von Karman, to name a few of the current and past members of MJ-12. The officer also relates the fact that EBEs claim to have created Christ. Now, this did come up as well in the blue documents that was sort of that were read allegedly by Bob Lazar.
This is stunning as well. The aliens created Christ. Wow. I mean, which is more shocking? The aliens creating Christ, or Richard Carrier saying there's a big chance that Christ never even existed? Which is worse? I mean, holy mackerel. Talk about blowing us out of our culture, out of our religion, out of our philosophy and hope and safety and justice. Nothing about this can be comfortable to anybody if this is true. We don't know it is. Like he said, it's not like Lear saw all this stuff or heard all this stuff either. This whole thing could be a psyop. But if it is the truth, now, of course, everyone's going to start screaming, yeah, it's definitely all lies, all lies, all lies. What would the point be of 100% lies? Or do we just pick the parts we're uncomfortable with and call them lies so that we can psychologically process what the hell we just heard? This is a huge WTF moment, because I have had Christian friends, I have had Mormon friends, I have had Jewish friends tell me, oh, well, just because the aliens show up, that's not going to affect our religion. Really? Then how are you going to handle what you're about to hear and what you've already heard in the last minute? Let's keep going. This is really shocking.
During his briefing at S4, him and Gene Huff had made a project about this, and this was really, really fascinating to a lot of people.
Extremely classified document dealing with religion, and it's about that thing. That we're containers. That's how supposedly the aliens look at us. That religion was specifically created, so we have some rules and regulations for the sole purpose of not damaging the containers.
Meaning,
well, the souls or the bodies, whatever. Right? That's
meaning like we're containers for souls that they're going to use at some other point.
Right.
And that they had something to do with different prophets and biblical figures.
Yes. Supposedly, Jesus and two other beings were genetically engineered. They were implanted in people on Earth in biblical times, and their births were closely monitored. Now, just some little connections to that my wife had brought up were in the Bible. They said that the star had followed Mary wherever she went, and that all UFO sightings always start out as people, well, gee, that looks like a bright star, and well, in fact, they said in the Bible, the brightest star in the sky followed her where she went, and it just made little connections like that.
So Mary, the mother, was a genetically created being by these aliens. The star, the ship, the craft, the orb that we see, orbs like in our skies right now today, followed her because, of course, they created her and they wanted to protect her and make sure that Jesus, also their own genetic creation, survived his birth, etc. You don't think that wouldn't change your religious view if this is what really happened? Don't kid me, man. That's a bombshell. That is a soul-rending bombshell. So is it true? Who knows? But just because it's uncomfortable doesn't mean you can say, well, I know it's false. You do not. I can't say whether it's true or false, just that it is presented in this manner as having something to do with the ETs is shocking. This is what I mean when I say psychologically, I don't think we're ready for this. I really don't.
ETs have a type of recording device that has recorded all of Earth's history and can display it in a form of a hologram. This hologram can be filmed, but because of the way holograms work, does not come out very clear on movie or film. The crucifixion of Christ on the Mount of Olives has allegedly been put on film to show the public. The EBEs claim to have created Christ, which, in view of the grand deception, could be an effort to disrupt traditional values for undetermined reasons. So that's a big one to swallow there. I'm not going to go down this hole because I know I do respect people's right to, belief. I do understand that some might take offense even at the speculatory nature of this being true. And I do understand that this can be blasphemous to those who do believe. But for the sake of research, we are going to entertain these ideas throughout this podcast.
Yeah, I'm with him on that. I'm just letting my raw emotions show, because I'm assuming all of this is true, just to catch my reaction. Because if you think my reaction is strong, and it's really not, because I'm holding back, what happens if this really does end up being the real deal in this manner? I mean, man, I hope to God it's not. But we don't know. Because we're being deceived. This is the great deception. This is really, truly, this is the intrigue. This is the mystery. This is the angering aspect of this. This is the part that you just, God, I'd rather go hike in the mountains. Well, I would rather go hike in the mountains. I agree. But this issue, this entire UFO thing affects everybody all the way around the world. So we're going to have to learn how to deal with each other all over again in different ways than we have been, if even a smidgen of this stuff turns out to be real or accurate. Yeah. I am just stymied at what I've heard. This is truly astonishing. And I agree with him. And you who have been following my channel, this is my style too. Look at all sides. Look at all angles. Let everyone have a voice. I've talked about Stephen Greer. I know people can't stand him. I know people almost worship him. Others are neutral, etc. I've talked about George Knapp. I've talked about Farsight. I've talked about lots of different famous ufologists. I've tried to share some ideas on the craft, who they are. Are they our future selves? Are they interdimensional beings? Jacques Vallée's point of view. I've discussed Gary Nolan from the scientific side and Kevin Knuth, etc. All of the ideas have to be explored so that we can validly situate it in what I would hope is as close to a realistic approach and view as we can. That's the goal. I think that's what he's doing. John Lear, how far can we trust this information? I don't know. I don't like the idea of having to trust it very far, but that's irrelevant if this is actually valid. You see what I mean? So in the process of trying to prevent myself future problems, future changing of my mind and rendering of my heart and tearing my soul out because I am so angry, and you know what I mean? I'm trying to adjust here and now with the idea that, damn, I might be facing some very, very difficult future truth here. I don't know how I'm going to respond. I really hope the majority of this is wrong. But see, I've seen some parts, bits and pieces and parts of all of this elsewhere. So this is the rabbit hole, man. Welcome to Alice in Wonderland, so to speak. This is some heavy duty stuff. Yeah. You know what? I didn't realize this was this long. Holy crap. Let me go through a couple more. I'm not going to completely finish his analysis. I'm close, but that's actually the main part I wanted to show. Was I wanted to get it through that horrendous abuse of humanity that our government admitted and let them do this to us. They sold us out for their own selfish greed and power. And this religious earthquake that there's no way to wrap your head around it if that's really true. That's going to change a lot. I'm just saying. So, yeah, let me see what other idea. I need to close this out. I've said enough. I've gotten the information that I want. One more idea.
But for the sake of research, we are going to entertain these ideas throughout this podcast. Another videotape allegedly in existence is an interview with an EBE. Since EBEs communicate telepathically, an Air Force colonel serves as an interpreter. Just before the recent stock market correction in October 1987, several newsmen, including Bill Moore, had been invited to Washington, D.C. to personally film the EBE in a similar type interview and distribute the film to the public. Apparently, because of the correction in the market, it was felt the timing was not propitious. In any case, it certainly seems like an odd method to inform the public of extraterrestrials, but it would be in keeping with the actions of a panicked organization who at this point in time doesn't know which way to turn. I mean, you want to talk about a panic organization, just look at the people in charge right now of telling us what the hell's going on with these drone incursions. Moore is also in possession of more Aquarius documents, a few pages of which leaked out several years ago and detailed the super secret NSA project had been denied by them until just recently. In a letter to Senator John Glenn, NSA's Director of Policy Julia B. Wetzel wrote, apparently there is or was an Air Force project with that name, Aquarius, which dealt with UFOs. Coincidentally, there is also an NSA project by that name. NSA's Project Aquarius deals specifically with the communications with aliens, the EBEs. Within the Aquarius program was Project Snowbird, a project to test fly a recovered alien aircraft at Groom Lake, Nevada. This project continues today at the location. In the words of an individual who works at Groom Lake, our people are much better at taking things apart than they are at putting them back together.
So actually, there really is real UFOs in the sky if they have an intact UFO or one that they built, and they're test flying it out and about to see how well it works. You really are seeing real UFOs. That's crazy beans, isn't it? I will put a link of his video in the description. He's still got about 20 minutes to go, and I've been trying to intersperse my commentary. I wanted to at least get it up to this part of the discussion simply because I had the greatest anger as well as the greatest shock, both with my sense of justice and morality, as well as with my sense of religious faith and hope. It's hard to assess without giving it more thought. I might return to this in another video where after I have thought about the ramifications morally, religiously, etc. I don't know. This is enough to blow your mind. If it didn't, I don't believe you. I think you're lying to yourself. If this doesn't positively shock you and give you moral outrage, you slept through the wrong part. Go back and rewatch it. I can't imagine anyone being okay with letting women get raped, pregnant, and then their child stolen, or letting their own children or grandchildren be used by an alien for whatever purpose without supervision or parental permission. If you're okay with that, get the hell off my channel. I don't want you watching my stuff. I want to be as far away from you as I can get. Yeah. So anyway, that's enough, because if I get started on this, I am going to explode, and you don't want to see that. I don't want to do that either. That's not my style, but this is very upsetting on so many levels. And so I have to, I have to sit back, digest it, try to comprehend. Again, all of this could be psyops, right? But what would the purpose be? Look how riled I can get. And I promise I've kept the lid on this. But is that the point? Get us so riled that we begin to fight each other, maybe, because you divide and conquer? Is this type of information being fed to us to make us argue and hate each other? Religion against religion, politician against politician, political party against political party, so that then all of a sudden they can step forward as our saviors and dominate the world and enslave us. Who knows? But that point of view is not out of the realm of possibility, because this strikes at the core of our morality, at the core of our humanity, at the core of our faith. Good God, what else can they strip us of? That's why this is so important, even if it's all BS. And we can't say which part is or which part isn't. And so we're left confused, which means we're easier to influence and control anyway. Whether this is a psyop, it's dangerous. Whether it's the truth, it's dangerous. And so I would propose it is really important for us to at least be aware, so that we can help one another get through this, instead of fight, hate, and kill one another. See what I mean? I don't know if I'm even making sense. I hope so. I hope so. I'll have to think about this. I hate to. I have more happy things I want to go think about. This is a horror show. But yeah. So I'll stop it at that. Thank you so much for indulging me. This was pretty important to me. I was screaming at the top of my lungs today at lunch watching that. I was not happy with this. This is such a superb podcast. I'll leave the description in the link in the description, but I wanted to add my commentary to this because he is so much better at being an objective reporter of a potential psyop. I'm not. I want the truth. Or do I? I'm not so convinced I want the truth anymore. I don't know, man. What's good and what's evil? Who's good and who's evil? Man, that's scary when that line starts being blurred, right? And I'm not accusing this gentleman of not wanting the truth either. Please don't take it that way at all. This guy is a great guy. I like him enormously. So anyway, all right. That's enough. I had to get that off my chest. Yeah, I haven't seen a YouTube video that got me this emotionally distraught, angry, and in quite a while. This one struck a nerve. Even if it's a psyop, that doesn't lessen this. It doesn't make it less problematic. There's the irony of this. Anyway, okay. Thanks, you guys. I appreciate all your support and love. Hit the like button. Share this if you wish. And come back. I'm going to have a whole boatload more for you as I have the time. I love y'all, but I got to go. Catch you soon.